Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with the astute Charles Coulombe.
Astute? I like that. I like astute.
Good.
I think astute's good.
Yeah. So, we just finished Holy Week. Well, the people have just finished Holy Week. We're just starting Holy Week.
We are. We're living way in the past, ladies and gentlemen. There was no way we were going to do this on Good Friday. Ain't happening.
Yeah.
So, I'm afraid we're living a week behind you in real time. I'm good with that.
I'm good with that, too.
Yeah. Now, I do have some disturbing news, though, of the opening of this Holy Week, the beginning of Easter.
What?
It's very disturbing. It's from the world of surveys and statistics.
Okay.
Apparently, the most recent studies show that something like 68% of internet trolls, the people who send Instagrams, apparently something like 78 to 79% of them, when infants suffered from either or both weaning problems and toilet trap issues. And something like 36% of them will suffer from, gender confusion issues.
Wow.
Isn't that horrible?
That's terrible.
Huh. So the next time one of our wonderful audience decides to play troll on us, we'll know who you are.
That's true.
Mm-hmm. Sitting there, your underwear, acne face, very upset with life, and taking it out on two hapless do-gooders.
Yeah.
Shame. Shame. What? All right, fine. Forget it. What do we got?
Before we start, one guideline for people who send questions to Charles. I just thought I'd mention the general rule is the more esoteric the question, the less likely I'm going to ask it on the show. I strongly favor questions that have a broad appeal, but there are exceptions to every rule. So don't stop sending questions in. If you think your question is esoteric, don't, keep sending them in. I just sort of wanted to help people manage their expectations, shall we say.
Well,
we get a lot of questions, too. We get an awful lot of questions.
Yeah, and if you're going to ask me, what do you think of Eva Gartenman's views of Area 51? Okay, I don't know who Eva Gartenman is, and Area 51 is secret, and I don't know anything about it anyway. So, you'll get a big fat from me.
Okay.
All right, let's see what we got.
Okay, first question is from Thomas Michael. The Diocese of Pittsburgh is having an ecumenical Tenebrae with other non-Catholic faith leaders being alongside the bishop. Is this an allowed or orthodox practice?
Well, those are two different things. It's obviously allowed, and the bishop wouldn't do it.
Well, first off, what's an ecumenical Tenebrae, in quotes?
In quotes. What it is Tenebrae originally was the morning prayer service, that is to say the hours, the matins and lauds, on the mornings of Monday, Thursday, Good Friday, Holy Saturday. Over time, these pulled back, so they were said Spy Wednesday night, Monday, Thursday night, Good Friday night. Now they've sort of restored to their morning times. As for an ecumenical one, I guess that's where the bishop gathers with members of various false faiths and untrue religions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be it.
All right.
So, okay, so...
There's nothing against it. It's his diocese. He can wear it as a festive party hat if he likes.
But is that an orthodox practice? I mean,
Now
does he decide what's orthodox?
See, that's a whole other question. Notice the hands flailing.
Okay.
You brought up a whole other story. Whether it's orthodox depends precisely on the nature of the prayers, the nature of the people. I don't know. I'd have to see the texts.
Okay. Okay, next question is from Jack. I heard from a priest that it is a mortal sin for a woman to have a job outside the home without a grave reason.
Well, see, the problem with that is that while it's certainly preferable to have the wife at home, our evil economic structure is based in part so that she has to be out there working like a dog, like a man. So I'll certainly accept the proposition that it's wrong for a mother of that age, of any age, right, of any wife of any age, to work outside the home. But today we're under an economic system that forces it. So
it's a question of necessity. I mean, what if
yeah, it's a question of necessity. I mean, ordinarily, your stealing from a store would be a mortal sin, except that you're in danger of starvation.
I see.
So no longer.
Okay, so what you're saying is in this area we have to use our conscience, let our conscience guide us. Is that what you're saying? I'm just making sure.
Sort of. But it's got to be an informed conscience.
Oh, an informed conscience.
It's not just whatever you think is okay. Sorry. Despite what I've heard about you in human resources.
Okay.
No, they're all right with it. It's all right. What else you got?
All right. Next question is from Jay Poole.
Mm-hmm.
I have recently referred back to Charles's compendium on the Vicars of Christ. I noticed there was no mentioning of the tale of Pope Clement VIII blessing coffee for all Catholics to enjoy, despite him being urged to condemn it. Is there any validity to this tale?
I have no idea. I haven't heard it. I don't know. So, it sounds good. I hope he did, but I don't know.
Does it sound like something Pope Clement VIII would do? Bless the coffee?
I didn't know him that well. We weren't buds.
No?
No.
Okay.
But it was a position to do it.
Okay.
So, who knows?
What does that mean to bless coffee for all Catholics? I mean, does the Pope have a power? I mean, what does that mean?
That was a yawn. Did you see that?
Yeah.
That was terrible.
Yeah.
No, I did not have a big meal, for those of you who are wondering. I think, if anything, it's the opposite. Lent is making me sleepy.
Yeah.
But, to answer the question, we don't even know if we don't even know the size of the meal.
The size of your meal?
No, the meal, yeah.
What are you talking about?
I'm babbling. No, seriously, I really don't have an answer to that as far as coffee goes, except that I could use about a gallon.
But I mean, what would that mean for a pope to bless an entire food like that?
Well,
what does that mean?
all it would mean is that there's nothing inherently wrong with it. You know, in other words, all right, listen, we live in the food fascist era, right? When people, everyone's, I'm gluten-free, and I'm, oh no, and it's dairy, what is that, lactose intolerant. The only place where you're allowed to be intolerant is when faced with lactose, apparently. And I'm a vegan, and my body's a temple, and I'm a non-smoker, and I'm a non-drinker, and I'm so much morally superior to you. Well, okay. Up against some little set of mouths doing that, imagine a pope comes up and says, well, no, I like red meat a lot. Well, suddenly steak becomes a thing that for a Catholic you can't really fight with. You can't say, vegan's better. So similarly, if you blessed coffee, then its use cannot be considered wrong. Harmful, maybe, if you're too keyed up, but not wrong in the sense that grabbing a university professor and pistol whipping him would be.
You mentioned the gluten-free people. Do you think the church should
They
be
should
accommodated?
be pistol whipped.
They should not be pistol whipped?
No.
Okay, well, I'm glad you cleared that up.
All right.
What do you think about the church accommodating the gluten-free people? Like at our mass, or our Latin mass, the priest goes back to the altar, gets the other Eucharist, and there's always the same 3 or 4 people, the gluten-free people.
I don't know if that invalidates it. I just don't know. But it sounds weird, and probably they'd be better off not being weird. But who am I to say? Priests have been weird my whole life, and there's nothing you can do if they choose to be.
They're better off not being weird.
All right, if you say so.
No, you said that. I'm confirming.
Oh, well, if I said that, it may be true.
Okay.
All right, what else we got?
Next question is from Dakota Charles. I always get asked, why Catholicism and not Orthodoxy? So my question is, why Catholicism and not Orthodoxy?
Well, I would say it's a question of ecclesiology. I mean, look, even if you don't happen to like a given pope, he is the successor of St. Peter. For the first 1,000 years, there was no question about that. The Eastern Schism breaks out, and all sorts of justifications come up, many of which justifications are not, if you pardon the expression, entirely unjustified. In other words, from time to time, popes have been awful. It's impossible for us to think of that now. But in days gone by, you could have a pope who was just terrible, maybe even evil, yet he was still pope. So, my reason for being Catholic rather than Orthodox is that I want to be tied in to that conduit of authority from heaven to earth.
Isn't it? I mean, isn't that a strike against you though in the Last Judgment? I mean, if you don't submit to the Roman Pontiff, I mean, I thought that's part of the magisterium. That's part of I don't know if that made it on one of the creeds.
I don't know.
But I mean, isn't it part of the magisterium? You must submit to the Roman Pontiff.
No, yeah, it's actually Peter Pius IV.
Creed the Pius. I know. There we go. Okay. So isn't that's pretty significant to me?
Well, it is, but then there's a question of how do you submit to the Roman Pontiff. So, for instance, as you know, Cardinal Mahoney obeyed the Pope. Sort of.
Did he?
Sort of, in a way, kind of. But he supported the Pope with lip service. And then?
Which Pope?
Well, first Benedict, yeah.
Yeah.
And then when he got the apple of his eye, he was quite complete and, thorough in his support of him. And then said apple of said eye turned around and protected him against his predecessor's punishing.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
Love is everywhere.
Cardinal Mahoney really likes Pope Francis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like this.
Yeah. What do you think of that?
I have a sudden desire to put my thumb to my nose and wave my fingers.
Okay. I'm trying to wake you up a little bit. I'm trying to get those juices flowing.
I know. I've got the Lenten fatigue, ladies and gentlemen. This will happen to you if you keep your Lent very, very faithfully and do some heavy laboring on the weekends.
That'll do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what else we got?
Next question is from Gordon Anderson. Would you talk about Winston Churchill?
The only thing oh no, that's FDR, never mind. I have never promised anything but blood, tears, toil, and sweat.
That's the actor who married Elizabeth Taylor, Mark Anthony.
Richard Burton.
Richard Burton. That's Richard Burton. That's not Winston Churchill. I know my stuff. You can't fool me. You can't fool me.
Picky. We have fought in France. We will fight in the air. We will fight on the beaches. We will fight with ever-increasing strength and assurance until at last, in God's good time, the new world shall come through to the aid of the old. So is that better?
That's good.
Thank you. But Churchill, he had a lot of admirable qualities. But personally, I think he really misread the geopolitical situation of his time.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Well, let's put it another way. He saw some things but he didn't want to see others.
Like?
Well, he saw the danger Germany posed to Britain. He saw the danger Germany posed the entire continent. He did not see the danger the United States posed the British Empire.
How is that?
Well, because we had a president called Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Yeah, your favorite president.
That's right. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Frankly, I'll take fear, but never mind. He wanted to scuttle the British Empire and take it over.
Did he say that? How could you know that?
It's pretty well documented.
It's documented?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
It means you can read about it.
Read what?
Read a
FDR. Read FDR saying that.
FDR hates our guts.
Is that
by
what
Winston Churchill. It was a foreword by Charles de Gaulle. Yeah, he does. No, it was obvious from a dozen different policy statements and so forth. He wanted to replace Britain and the European allies with the Soviet Union and the United States as the two powers that would control the world. Now, Churchill could not see that kind of villainy on Roosevelt's part. If you ask why, it is simply because he was half American. And that, it blinded him to the fact that we could, sometimes we're not nice.
Okay. Last week, coincidentally, I just seen Darkest Hour.
Yeah.
Gary Oldman as Winston Churchill. I'm sold immediately. He did a great job. I loved it. See Darkest Hour. I love that movie. But I mean, obviously, it's poor. It's not recommended to get a historical basis from a movie, but it made me wonder, to what extent did FDR slow play America's involvement in World War II so that Britain is sort of crippled first, and then just sort of come in and take over everything? Was that the plan?
Not really.
No, not really. Okay.
Not really. I mean, there's several different things going on at once. The first is that Hitler wanted to be the master of Europe, but he was not interested in the overseas world.
Okay.
He wanted, really, he wanted to divide the world with the British Empire, the way FDR wanted to divide it with Stalin.
Interesting. So Halifax was right well, I guess in real life and the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, that.
Halifax understood the Americans in a way that Churchill just didn't.
Interesting.
And I have to say something else, which is going to sound like heresy.
Uh-oh.
You know the old thing about Edward VIII, the Duke of Windsor, being pro-Nazi?
Yeah.
You know the problem with that?
What?
Where do you think he and his wife were living when France fell to the Germans?
Paris.
Yeah. How come the Germans didn't capture them?
Because they were pro-Nazi.
If they were pro-Nazi, they would have fallen into Hitler's hands, and he would have made them King Edward and Queen Wallis of a government in exile. No. They fled. They had many hair-raising adventures. They got out of France, they go to Spain, same thing. And they finally make it to Lisbon and a British battleship. These are not the actions of a man who wants to work with Hitler.
Who says he's pro-Nazi?
Idiots. The same kind of people who call Pius the 12th Hitler's Pope. The morons. You know, my favorite clash of people, my fan base.
Uh-huh.
My real fan base, ladies and gentlemen. Not even people that say nice things and all that, but the trolls, you know, the people with the weaning problems. And yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, seriously. Pius XII and Edward VIII have that in common. In reality, if Edward had been pro-Nazi, he would have allowed himself to be captured, instead of this weird hair-raising adventure across France, Spain, and Portugal. But going back to Churchill for a moment, what Edward VIII did understand, what Halifax understood, what Chamberlain understood, is that Britain could afford to fight a Second World War or keep its empire. It couldn't do both. Now, mind you, don't think that because of don't think that because of Churchill's desire to push the war with Hitler, that he was keen on losing the British Empire.
Yeah.
He said very specifically, I have not become the king's first, sorry for you, I have not become the king's first minister to preside over the dissolution of the British Empire. But the fact was, it was the inevitable conclusion.
Okay, well, a couple things. One, so you're saying that the British were not fighting for survival in the war?
Oh,
because, I mean...
no, I don't think so.
So that was an actual choice, because if you're fighting for survival, there is no choice. It's fight or...
Well, I let's put it this way. I believe that Churchill was certainly sincere, and I believe that he thought it was a fight for survival.
Right.
Absolutely.
But you don't think that they needed to fight in order to survive?
No, I don't.
Hitler would have just left.
I would have left them alone.
Okay.
Now, mind you, I didn't say there might not be other unpleasant consequences of that, but I mean certainly the Jewish, Gypsy, and other populations of Europe, the Poles, etc., would not have enjoyed their lives. Moreover, the sheer stupidity of the Nazi regime, set aside for the moment, the fact that it was evil, all right? There are many evil regimes in the world. Take a regime that would allow its own infants to be murdered in the womb and think that was okay. Take a regime that would change the very nature of marriage or even gender. Such a regime would be, objectively speaking, evil. But, here's the big but, the Nazis were not just evil, they were stupid. And the proof of the pudding was on the Eastern Front. Why do I say this? They invade the Soviet Union. They're greeted by children with flowers. Soviet divisions begin defecting to them. The General Vlasov commanded these. Well, there was a young German army officer who was appointed as the liaison between Vlasov and the German army. And his name was Klaus von Stauffenberg.
Ah.
Of Boom Boom fame. Valkyrie.
Yeah.
Tom Cruise doing such a great acting job, you forget it's him.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, but for him that's a tremendous thing when you don't even think about it being him anymore.
Yeah.
When you stop gritting your teeth, Tom's done well. But anyway, what should happen? But that went on for so long. But then the Nazi machinery came in, began doing its stuff. Because at the end of the day, the Nazis were more interested in their racial views and their weird theories than they were in defeating the Russians.
Mm.
If Hitler had meant what he said about a pan-European crusade against Bolshevism, he'd have won.
Wow.
And so Stauffenberg could see not only that these people were terrible and evil in themselves, but they were stupid. And they were going to destroy the country through an enormous defeat. Now, having said all of that, let's go back to the Allies, where I think Churchill, but particularly Roosevelt, who was the big pusher of this, made a huge mistake, was the unconditional surrender thing.
Yeah, we've talked about that on you said hugely immoral.
Yeah, well, it's hugely immoral by itself, but it's also, again, stupid.
Yeah.
Because, get rid of Hitler and we'll talk.
Right.
And again, you have people say, well, that's a secondary appeasement. What are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to accomplish the destruction of the Nazis or the destruction of Germany?
Mm.
What are you after? If you're after the destruction of the Nazis, and you can do it without destroying yourself, all right, fine, more power to you.
Yeah.
But if you're after the destruction of Germany, to hell with you. If you're after the destruction of any country,
yeah,
as opposed to a leadership that have put you in danger, to hell with you. Because that's genocide. And you had people like Morgenthau and all that on our side who wanted, literally, to reduce Germany to a scorched earth. And they had the ear of President Roosevelt. Now, the other thing, again, was Roosevelt's fond idea that he could split domination of the world with Joseph Stalin. What possible justification could there be for that?
yeah,
And then, when we win, all right, the British are struggling. Keep their empire. Those guys were on rations, literally food stamps, for 10 years after the war.
wow,
Until 1955. People don't realize what that war did to them. It ruined them. The French were smashed. And they would try to hold on to their empire in Algeria and Indochina and all that. What do? We grease the skids for them. The Dutch in the East Indies, same. When does spoking the wheels of your allies, when does that become an honorable or moral or good thing? And Halifax saw us for what we were.
So you think okay. So you don't think Britain should have entered the war?
Not if she could have brought about the overthrow of Hitler before the war, which actually, had they given a show of force, this is where, by the way, Churchill was completely right. And again, and Halifax was wrong. If they had made a show of force over the Rhineland, the German army would have overthrown Hitler. We know this. Same with the Anschluss in '38. Same with the Czechs. See, you might say that the great tragedy was that when they should have been tough, they were weak. And when they should have been conciliatory, they were tough.
Okay.
But, you know, to be fair, and you know I'm nothing if not fair, it is also the fact that having gone through one war with the Germans, a lot of people suspected, you know, well, this time we'll finish the job. Kind of like the great thing we did with Iraq.
So you're saying, so are you saying then that if Churchill had been prime minister instead of Chamberlain, then... If Churchill had been prime minister in 1936 instead of 1940? Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then he was absolutely right. Because he would have struck while he could. And he might have been prime minister if Edward VIII had stayed king. Oh, we forgot that part about Churchill being one of King Edward's favorites.
Yeah.
Yeah, well. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, we are never given to know what would have happened or what could have happened. All we're stuck with is what has happened.
I have one last question. I'm trying to reconcile what you say in Puritan's Empire.
I lied.
Because you say that FDR was eager to enter World War II. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Well, at least well, look, I'm not, again, using the movie as historical basis.
I know what you're getting at, though.
Yeah, that FDR is telling Churchill that there are various neutrality acts and he can't help Churchill.
Well, he couldn't beyond a certain point.
But are you saying he wanted to? He legitimately wanted to.
He wanted, I don't know if it was legitimate, but he certainly wanted to, and he did. He broke the neutrality laws eventually. The thing was, you got to bear in mind, there was a huge opposition to getting into that war in this country.
Right.
The America First Committee and all that. And even Churchill, who wanted to get into the war, he told the League of American Mothers, whatever they were in 1940, I will not send your sons to die in some foreign war. Because even then he was planning. And the truth of the matter is that he made deals with Churchill that we got the benefit out of. The British they were able to hold on.
Yeah.
But like the basis for battleships thing. We turn over a bunch of old battleships, lucky them. We get bases across the British Empire in return.
Yeah.
Lend-lease. These things were all violations of neutrality. We had American ships convoying British merchant ships. That's a violation of the Neutrality Act.
Yeah.
So when we occupied Iceland, so the British could withdraw their troops from Iceland.
Okay.
Well, you know, and we were similarly ham-handed with the Japanese. You know, the Prince Konoe, who was the Japanese prime minister, was so anxious to stay out of war with us that he offered to come to Washington personally.
I see.
To deal with Roosevelt. Now, that may not sound like much to us, But remember the Japanese in those days were very much on face and losing it or gaining it. For him, to propose even going over to the Gaijin country, as though they were somehow equal, was a risk. And then when Roosevelt just flippantly refused, it destroyed Konoe. And making a deal with Konoe to include a withdrawal from China would have prevented a war in the Far East for us. It also would have kept our British, French, and Dutch allies from being attacked by the Japanese.
I see.
But we wanted to get into that war. And although we were doing things like torpedoing German ships on the high seas before Pearl Harbor, Hitler, who may well have been evil and in some ways very stupid when it came to the Slavs, he was not stupid when it came to the United States. And despite all the provocations we gave him,
he wouldn't take the bait.
Nope, wouldn't touch it. So
he's probably scared.
Yeah, of course he was scared.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he knew that eventually, adding our might, our open intervention in the war, would do what it did in the First War. And again, he was a First War veteran.
Right.
So he wasn't keen on this stuff. He'd been gassed. So, what are you left with? Well, what you're left with is Japan, whose leadership, especially after Prince Konoe fell, their leadership were completely unable to fathom dealing with us. And so when Roosevelt gives them an ultimatum, and he says, get out of China or we will cut off all scrap metal and oil shipments to you, that was basically threatening the Japanese home islands with starvation.
Wow.
Now, what were they going to do?
Yeah.
Now, a smart person would not have done it. Admiral Yamamoto, who led the attack on Pearl Harbor, said this is the stupidest thing you can do.
Yeah.
America is a sleeping giant. Do not awaken it. That was Yamamoto's advice, but he was just a sailor, so he didn't know anything, unlike the smart guys of the Japanese army. Well, where's all this going? Where it's going is that the Japanese high command ruined themselves by going to war with us. And Roosevelt, there's a lot of varied chatter about what Roosevelt thought was really going to happen. The most innocent theory, let's say, thought that had him thinking, well, they'll attack the Philippines and we'll go to war. And they would exonerate him from the Pearl Harbor disaster.
Okay.
There's another school of thought that holds that he didn't think an attack on the Philippines would be dramatic enough, and that he basically ordered the fleet back to Pearl and had them line up in a peacetime formation on purpose.
Yeah.
He also sent the aircraft carriers out to sea. Now remember, those battleships that went down Pearl Harbor were outmoded.
Okay.
So they were not a tremendous loss to our capacity. They lost the men and women was.
Yeah.
But people who hold this view, and I'm not saying I'm one of them, because this is an area where there are a lot of different views, and I'm not in a position to say who's right. But the holders of this view believe that basically Roosevelt knew that the Japs were headed for Pearl Harbor and deliberately kept the ships where they were. If that is true, and I have to say if because I'm not being funny or coy, I really don't know, but if that is true, that has got to be one of the most horrible and cynical acts that any president of this nation has ever committed. Treasonous almost.
Well, you put forth a more detailed case in favor of that one. You went into the whole thing about the weather forecast and that we broke their code.
Yeah.
And that by knowing the code, we knew that it was going to happen. There's like this whole, there are books on this.
There are. The real question, though, boils down to what did FDR know and when did he know it?
Oh, I see. Okay.
And that is the $5 million question, you know.
Yeah.
Who else was on the grassy knoll other than Kukla, Fran, and Ali?
Oh, yeah.
The three killers.
Oh, okay.
No 3 bullets fired that day by 3 puppets. Kukla, Fran, and Ali.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Some of them will.
Yeah.
All right.
The main thing, what I was just curious is whether you thought FDR was slow playing his hand in order to get positioning himself afterwards, or if he legitimately couldn't help and he was eager. So you're saying
I think he was keen on getting in on the deal for his reasons.
Yeah.
I don't think he wanted Britain to follow the Germans.
Yeah.
But I think he was keen on getting into it for his own reasons. I do think he was adjusting himself, because he was a political animal, nowhere around that. And when I say adjusting himself, I mean not only to deal with the majority in favor of peace at home, but also to derive the maximum benefit from shredding the British Empire after the war, which he did. He succeeded on both counts. He was the second most successful politician of the World War II era.
The first being
Stalin.
Wow. Okay. Our last 2 questions are from Jay Voiles.
Hello, Jay.
You mentioned in a previous episode that you consider Ray Bradbury the greatest living American writer.
Not anymore. He's dead.
Since he has died, who do you now consider to be the greatest living American writer?
You know, that's a really hard one.
Is this a world's tallest pygmy type thing to you?
Well, partly, and also because so many of my favorite writers at the present have flaws that are almost as big as their virtues.
Like? Oh, you don't want to say?
No, I'll say it. I don't care. I'll give it a run for his money. Of course, I guess it is, I would have said 2, but one of them is now an unperson, who no longer exists. He's been airbrushed out of the picture.
Okay. Are you going to tell us?
I don't know if I should, because I could be accused of harassing women on the air.
Okay, well, it's your call.
All right, we'll risk it. Garrison Keillor.
That the radio show guy you talked about before?
Yeah, but he was attacked for, apparently this woman had like a low-cut dress on her back, and he bumped into her and he put his hand on her to study her, and then he suddenly realized that his hand was on her naked back, and he pulls it away and apologizes. She claimed it was okay at the time, but then suddenly discovered it was all terrible. And so Minnesota Public Radio just removed it completely. Took away the shows which you used to be able to access. Poof, non-person.
He's a writer?
Not anymore, he doesn't exist.
No, I mean, but he wrote books.
Oh, when he was alive.
Yeah,
when in existence.
Yeah.
Yeah. He wrote books, like Wobegon Days and things like that.
Okay.
A lot of Americana.
Yeah.
The other is still a person for the moment, and that is Stephen King.
Whoa. Suspiciously mainstream pick from you. Or is Stephen King? It's pretty,
Well, even when he fails in a big way. But, I mean, I won't give anything away, but when I got to the final volume of The Gunslinger, I just wanted to throw the thing across the room and murder someone. But having said that, in things like Salem's Lot and Needful Things and The Stand, again, Americana. And really, I've always seen a similarity in his work and Keillor's work, because there's a dark touch to Keillor's work, just as there's a comedic touch to King's. It's almost as if the proportion of comedy versus horror were reversed.
Interesting.
And this really came out in Garrison Keillor's movie, back when it existed, called A Prairie Home Companion, in which the actual Angel of Death makes an appearance.
Wow.
Yeah. So, anyway, for what it's worth, I would say, and you know what? A third that I have far fewer reservations about is Dean Koontz. whose work I really, really enjoy. He doesn't have the ideological problems that Stephen King has. And he doesn't, and he is still a person. He hasn't been airbrushed off like Garrison Keillor.
Stephen King has written so many books. I mean, how many? Dozens upon dozens of books.
I've read a lot of them, but not all.
Yeah.
Also, his I think one or two of his sons are beginning to write too, writing several things already. And one of them, unless it's just one, in which case it makes it easier, wrote a really, really good piece. This good novel, if you like horror. If you don't, then don't read this stuff. If you don't like horror, ladies and gentlemen, then they've got a re-release of some Disney film coming out, which is pretty horrible. No, don't go see it. I saw as we said last time, I saw A Wrinkle in Time.
Yeah.
Terrible picture. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, a badly done movie is worse than a horror movie.
Well,
sometimes
it's so bad it's good. Mystery Science Theater 3000, there we go.
I'll grant you that. But that kind of genius happens but once in every other person. Anyway, so what else we got?
Okay, our final question today from Jay Royals. What are your thoughts on the use of pagan deities in Christian literature? Great writers such as Dante, Chaucer, Shakespeare, Tolkien, and C.S. Lewis have used pagan imagery and influences in their works. Lewis's use of the 7 medieval heavens in the Chronicles of Narnia, for example. Is this a good thing? Can a Catholic writer write a story with these influences?
Well, starting with the last question, if Dante was Catholic, yeah. Oh, he was one of the greatest Catholic writers, so yeah. The answer is they can. Do I think it's a good thing? Yeah, I think it's a good thing. I mean, if it's done well, if it's written well, holds together. And so long as the modern temptation to equate the pagan gods with Christ is avoided. He's just one more deity amongst many, that kind of thing. And equally phony or whatever. But other than that, it's fine.
So you're condoning use of pagan deities?
Oh, I'm sorry. Was that supposed to be like? I'm not condoning the use of pagan deities. I'm condoning their use as literary motifs.
As literary motifs?
Yes.
Wow, that's...
It means you get motif, not less.
Motif, not less?
That's a motif?
I'm actually full out of motif.
Oh, never mind. But no, so I don't have a problem with it.
Okay. Okay. Well, I guess that's it for the show.
Well, not entirely. Because when they see us next, it will be Easter Monday.
Yeah.
And you know what that means?
No.
There goes Peter Cottontail, hopping down the bunny trail. Hippity hoppity, hippity hoppity, Easter's on its way.
You like Peter Cottontail?
It's delicious. And there's more. Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget your Easter egg hunts. Don't forget to wear nice clothing, morning coat for you men on Easter Sunday, Easter parade. And don't forget Mr. Irving Berlin's Easter bonnet.
What's a man doing wearing a bonnet?
He wasn't wearing it. It's the name of the song.
Oh, okay.
In your Easter bonnet, with all the frills upon it. You remember? No, all right.
Before my time. Sorry.
It's okay. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, you will be seeing Easter. You'll experience Easter by the time you hear these words. So, from all of us here at the fabulous Tumbler House skyscraper, from all of us here, the ladies in the commissary, the accounting department, the guys in the motor pool, the girls in the secretarial pool, the suits on the top several floors, in their various gradations.
Mm-hmm.
The guys in the mailroom, everybody and ourselves, Vinnie Franchini and his brother, the top suit, Mr. Stephen Franchini, and myself. Together, ladies and gentlemen, we wish you all the happiest of Easters and a blessed, blessed, blessed Easter season.